Welcome to this tutor training video all about factoring. We're going to talk about in these videos three main topics for factoring: factoring out common factors, factoring with trinomials, and special cases. Let's go ahead and get started with common factors. Okay, this looks a little scary, but it's just all of the factoring methods we are going to talk about in this first video: common monomials and factoring by grouping. And you can see that we'll learn the other methods throughout the rest of the factoring videos. Okay, first you want to look for common monomials, and we'll talk about the greatest common factor in just a second. So just looking at this first trinomial, it's got three terms, so it's a trinomial. You're going to look for what they have in common. Let's look first at the numbers, the coefficients. So I can divide each of these terms by 7. Let me go ahead and do that. When you factor, the numbers that you divide don't go away, they just come out front. And so now I have x to the 8th minus 5x to the 7th plus 7x to the 6th. Okay, and some of your students might stop there because they found a common factor, factored it out, done. But it is not completely factored, which is why it's important to factor out the greatest common factor. So if I had instead factored out 7x to the 2nd, right, that would take out some of the x's from inside the parentheses, but not as many as I could. The greatest common factor takes out as many of the variables as they can. So 7x to the 6th, that's the most I can go because the last term only has x to the 6th. So I'm going to instead take out that. The coefficients will remain the same, and then I'll divide by x to the 6th. I'll write that down here. And if you remember your exponent properties, 8 minus 6 is going to be x to the 2nd, x to the 1st for this term, and then just a constant term at the end. Then you always want to check, especially with your students, to see if you can factor anything else out. We haven't talked yet about trinomials, but this is a prime trinomial, so we can't do anything more. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and you try the second one. Welcome back. You should have got that you could take out a 4 and 1a and 1b from each of the terms. And I always like to write it down here so I remember to divide every term by that greatest common factor. Okay, and it's important to tell your students that if they don't get the greatest common factor, they can just keep factoring until they can't factor anything else out. That works too. All right, 28 divided by 4 is 7. Subtract 1a and 1b from those. 40 divided by 4 is 10. And take away one of those a's and one of those b's. 20 divided by 4 is 5, and the ab divided by ab is 1, so 5 times 1 is just 5. 8 divided by 4 is 2. A to the 7th, and the b divided by b is 1. And there we go, we can't factor anything else out. Okay, we can factor out a common monomial, but it is also true that we can factor out a common binomial. We factor out two terms at a time. Here's what I mean. So if you look at this first polynomial, ab minus 6a plus 2b minus 12, all four terms have no common factors. I could factor out a 1, but it wouldn't change anything. I can't factor out an a or a b or a 2 from everything, and so I just can't do it. But if I look at just 2 at a time, I could factor something out of the first two terms. I could factor out an a, and I'll be left with a b minus 6. And then on those next two terms, I could factor out a positive 2. b minus 6. And now I have a common factor. Even though it doesn't look like the other common factors that you've seen in this video, you can take that whole binomial and factor it out. b minus 6. And then what I have left is a plus 2. If you multiply those two binomials out, you get back to AB minus 6A plus 2B minus 12. Okay, let's try one more. And if you want, you can pause the video and try it on your own, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it right now. So I like to draw a dividing line. I call it chopping in half in my class. For this one, I could just take out an x, but that's not the greatest common factor of these two, so I'm going to take out x squared, and I'm left with x plus 5. Okay, now this is tricky because I could just take out a positive 3, but I would not have the same thing in parentheses. You have to have the same binomial in order for this to work. So I'm going to take out a negative 3, and that changes the signs to be the same. So if I draw out x plus 5, of course I could write the x squared minus 3 first. It doesn't matter whichever way you write. There you go. That's factoring by grouping and factoring by pulling out something common. Go ahead and watch the next video about trinomials.